The ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting are really just along that same spectrum. They're actually close cousins, basically, because the ketogenic diet, by being ultra low carb, lowers insulin. If you compare fasting to a low carb diet, the low carb diet actually delivers 71% of the insulin lowering as fasting. Now you can't get better than fasting because you can't get lower than zero, right?
Yeah.
But it gets you most of the way there, this sort of ketogenic diet. So it actually is very, very effective. So a lot of the diseases of hyperinsulinemia, which is obesity, type 2 diabetes, can be treated very effectively with a ketogenic diet. So I have no problem. The other thing that most people have found is that if you're on a ketogenic diet, or if you're on a low carb diet, fasting is like really, really easy. And it's the same thing because your body's so adapted to fat metabolism, right? So after that first 2 weeks, your body's so used to burning fat, it makes no difference if it's burning fat like butter or fat like body fat. It's the same fat, right? So it just burns it. So if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. And maybe the ketones maybe suppress the appetite, so you don't have to eat.
Hey folks, welcome back to another episode. It's Mike Meltzer here with HighIntensityHealth.com. Very excited to be with Dr. Jason Fung to talk about his latest book, The Complete Guide to Fasting, and also, if you may remember, he wrote the Obesity Code. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But Dr. Fung, first of all, I want to welcome you to High Intensity Health Radio.
Thank you.
And commend you for your work and really
thanks.
encouraging people to learn more about fasting. And although it seems like a novel idea, humans have been doing this for quite a while. Is that right?
That's right. Well, really, they've been doing it since the dawn of humanity, and that's the whole point, is that what we have here is a therapeutic modality that's been used for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and now, for some reason, we all have decided that this is like the worst thing that people have ever done in their life, right? And it's like, that's ridiculous. And if you even look back at all the religions, you know, they all have prescribed periods of fasting, right? Some religions more than others, but people have always done it. In certain cultures, like the ancient Greeks, they did it for different reasons. For them, they did it for the mental clarity. But there is a long, long tradition with fasting. In the last 50 years or so, there's been this real move against it. Now, for example, you mention it and people just roll their eyes. They think it's like the dumbest thing they've ever heard. I'm like, well, what's so dumb about it, right? And that was the point I was at a few years ago when I was working with type 2 diabetics. So I'm a kidney specialist and we see a lot of type 2 diabetics and many of them are overweight. What you realize is that you have to take care of that diabetes, otherwise they're going to progress to have kidney disease, and to take care of the diabetes they have to lose weight. So somehow we got to the point where we were discussing fasting. I thought, oh, that's the dumbest idea ever, right? And then I thought, well, why is it so dumb? Like, what's wrong with it, right? So then I started to look, and really there's nothing wrong with it. There's all these benefits, but the bottom line for me was that it's a way that people lose weight. And people have always used it to lose weight, right? And it doesn't mean you have to fast for 40 days and 40 nights. It just means that you have to extend the time, let your body burn off some of the fat, and there's nothing wrong with that. So as I started to look into the physiology and so on, then I realized that there was actually all this important benefits that were going on with the fasting, and that there was no reason why we didn't use it, so that's why we started to use it for all our patients.
Yeah, and did you notice blood sugar regulation improved commensurate with the weight loss, or was that after the fact? Like, because you're working with diabetics.
Type 2 diabetes, the blood sugar often gets better before a lot of the weight is lost. So you can often pull people off of their medications, take them off of their insulin and so on. And that's one of the things that you have to be careful about, is that you don't take the same dose of all your medications, especially if they're diabetic medications, and change your diet at the same time. Because of course there's a risk that your sugars go too low. And luckily I'm able to monitor that and advise patients and that sort of thing. But yeah, absolutely, blood sugar comes down. It's not really that hard to understand. You don't eat, your blood sugar comes down, right? So nothing hard about it.
Yeah, and in these diabetic patients, do they have a trouble with doing this fasting protocol? Are they getting into ketosis? Is that what we're saying? Or are they,
I don't measure ketones, so I don't actually know if they're going into ketosis. Certainly some are going into ketosis, but I couldn't tell you because we don't measure it. We don't have a good system. I mean, there's systems for it, but it's not absolutely necessary either. So to simplify things, we actually don't require it of our patients. Many people like to see it to know if they're burning fat and so on, and if it helps them, great. But for many of our patients, they're older, they don't really want to do something extra. So.
Yeah. What about hypoglycemia?
Yeah, I mean, that's the major risk, right? So if you're taking blood sugar medications, then you may go hypoglycemic, right? The question is if you're not taking medication, so for somebody who's either not diabetic or diabetic but not taking medications, there's always this worry, oh, you're going to hypoglycemia. Well, no, that's not how the world works, right? And this is the same thing. So and people always tell you these crazy, crazy things about fasting. Yeah. One of them is you'll go hypoglycemic and like die or something, right? So it's like, okay, if that was true, then 100, 200 years ago, and it was winter and you're living in a cave somewhere and there's no food, you don't eat for a couple days, well, you'd go hypoglycemic and die, right? That's what happens to all the lions and the tigers and the bears. They all just have seizures and die, right? No, it's like, come on, that's just ridiculous, right? If you actually measure the blood sugar of people who fast, it typically goes down a bit, then stays in that normal range. And every single study has shown the same thing. The reason is your body will produce some of the sugar. The other thing it will do, of course, is reduce the need for sugar. So your body, most of your muscles, for example, will start burning fat. Your brain, which cannot, the body produces ketone bodies, and the ketone bodies will provide most of the energy needed for the brain. So you do need a little bit of glucose, but luckily you can get that from your body fat as well. So if you look at glycerol, which is the backbone of the fat molecule, so it's a glycerol plus 3 fatty acid chain. When you don't eat, your body cuts off those 3 fatty acids, the muscles use the fatty acids, the glycerol gets turned into glucose, and you have a little bit of glucose. But since most of your body is not using glucose, you don't really need that much.
Right.
So that's the point. You don't go hypoglycemic, right? It's the same thing. You hear this all the time, that the brain needs 130 grams of carbohydrates every day, so that therefore you must eat every single day, otherwise you're going to die. Right? And it's like, okay, that is just the most ridiculous thing ever. That anybody would ever think that honestly boggles my mind, because this is basic physiology, right? Not even like physiology 101. This is like high school physiology, right? Like not even like grade 12, it's like grade 9 physiology. It's like, the thing is that if you don't eat, what happens is that your body breaks down glycogen, provides glucose. So why do you need to eat? You don't. When you eat, you store energy. When you don't eat, your body pulls that energy back out. So for example, we ask people to fast all the time. If you're going for surgery, you don't eat. If you're going for a colonoscopy, you don't eat. If you're going for fasting blood work, you don't eat. If you're going for an ultrasound, you don't eat. Sometimes it's 18 hours, sometimes it's 20 hours. It depends on what the procedure is. So people fast all the time. Does any one of them ever go hypoglycemic or have a seizure, or there's no brain functions, they've turned into like slobbering idiots? No, they feel pretty normal.
Pretty good, actually, mostly,
Pretty
right?
good, yeah. Almost every single one of them. Yet you will hear some idiot writing somewhere that, oh, the brain needs 130 grams of carbohydrates to function. You must eat that amount every single day, each and every day of your adult life, otherwise you will become a slobbering idiot. It's like, oh my God. It's like, you can't be more idiotic if you try, right? Because the basic physiology has been worked out 50 years ago. And everybody knows it's false. So, but this is the thing, right? There's these truths that get passed on, and they get repeated so often that no matter how stupid they are, people believe them because they've been repeated over and over. It's like the calories thing, right? Oh, cut your calories, you'll lose weight. Has it worked for anybody, right? No, not really. I don't think it's ever worked, right? The studies have proved it, right? So it's like, why do we think that cutting calories will make you lose weight? Because everybody says so. That's the only reason. Is there any randomized trial? No, right? So there's so many examples here where people kind of repeat this, and fasting has more than the usual number of things: starvation mode, muscle loss. There's so many of these myths that go around, but definitely hypoglycemia is not one of the big concerns unless you're taking medications. Then you have to be careful. Yes.
And so in which case you would work with a practitioner, obviously, to make sure that we're, okay. You mentioned muscle loss. I think that's a big hurdle or mental hurdle for a lot of people, because people that are interested in like fine-tuning their health are generally active. They're exercising, doing CrossFit, weightlifting. We know that muscle's anti-aging. It's where insulin stores onto and so forth. You have a great argument as to why it's so silly to think that you would lose all this muscle when you do intermittent fasting.
Yeah, and this is the thing. Again, people who have a little bit of knowledge sometimes extrapolate, and it's not really warranted. So there's differences in terms of what happens. So as you fast, you will start with the glycogen. So your liver, so glycogen is change of glucose. So as you eat, you fill up your glycogen stores, and these are all chains of glucose. And that lasts anywhere from 24 to 36 hours, right? So if you don't eat for 24 hours, for the most part, you have enough glucose in your liver. You simply break all the glycogen back into little chains of sugar and send it back out. So you're not burning muscle, and everybody kind of knows that. At the other extreme, if you're fasting for more than about 36 hours or so, you're burning mostly fat. But there's a window in there where you do this so-called gluconeogenesis, where you use protein to kind of produce glucose. And that's where people say, wow, you're going to lose, and I've heard these numbers, oh, you're going to lose a quarter pound of muscle for every day you fast. Again, you'd have to realize that if you believe that, then you'd have to believe that Mother Nature designed our bodies to store food energy as fat and sugar, but when we actually need it, to burn protein, right? It's like, okay, well, that sounds pretty dumb, right? No system would work very well if it was designed that way. If you had, it's like you store firewood for your wood burning oven, but as soon as you need it, you chop up your sofa and throw it into the fire. It's like, why would you do that? Why would you think that? Why would you be so stupid, right? Why do you think our body is so stupid that it does that? If you're going to store energy as sugar and fat, you're going to burn sugar and fat, right? There is a portion in there where you're using some protein. So again, if you look at extended fasting, what you see is that there is a turnover every day of protein. And the protein gets turned into the glucose, but you don't ramp up that protein. It's not like you're increasing the burning of your protein. So if you think about it, if you have repeated, let's assume, for example, that's true, that you lose a quarter pound of muscle for every day you fast. So that means in a year, I should lose, let's see, I do maybe 3 days a week perhaps, right? So, so say in a couple years, I should lose all my muscle, right? I should be like 100% fat, right? Yeah. But I'm not. I've got bone, right? I've got skin, right? It's not like I burned off all my skin and turned it into a giant glob of fat that's just sitting here, right? It's like, come on, that's just the most ridiculous argument I've ever heard. And if you go back to studies of fasting, so it's like, if you think you're going to lose muscle while fasting, then do the study. Fast people measure their muscle mass at the end of it. Don't look at urea kinetics and all this stuff, because that's not your question. I didn't ask you about urea kinetics. So urea is the breakdown product of protein. Do the study where you take somebody, you fast, measure their muscle mass. Is it changed? And it's like, when you compare them, no, there's not much change.
Right.
I mean, obviously, it depends. Again, if you are very obese versus if you're very lean, then it's different too, okay? So a very obese person will burn much more fat, percentage-wise, than a lean person. Makes sense. Again, the body's just not that stupid, right? So the estimates is an obese person will burn about 90% of their calories as fat, whereas the lean person is down at 78. So they are burning more protein.
Interesting.
So absolutely, and this is why, because there's just a lot more fat in the fat person, right? So you're going to burn that. Right. That's just smart, right? So this is the thing. If you're worried about that, you do the study. So recently there was a study where they compared caloric restriction to alternate daily fasting. So you got to remember that anytime you lose weight, your lean mass also goes down, right? So it's not like pure fat that you're losing. So you can't take your baseline as zero lean body mass loss, right? And this is the mistake everybody always makes again. They say, wow, you're losing lean mass. Well, you lose lean mass anyway, right? Which one is worse? So they compared the lean mass loss in a fasting regimen versus a daily caloric restriction. And so if you look at the lean mass percentage, so after, I think, 32 weeks, so about 6 months, they measured it. And the lean mass percentage went up because you're losing more fat than lean mass in the caloric restriction by 0.5% and 2.2% in the alternate daily fasting. So in other words, the fasting group was 4 times better at preserving lean mass compared to caloric restriction. In other words, it's way better.
More efficient,
Way better, right? And the reasons are simple, right? It increases growth hormone, it increases noradrenaline. Those are so-called counter-regulatory hormones. Counter-regulatory hormones are so named because they counter the effect of insulin. So insulin lowers your blood glucose. When you're fasting, you want to pull that sugar back out, so raise blood glucose. So that's what they do. So growth hormone, noradrenaline. So what the noradrenaline does is, of course, give you more energy and keeps your metabolic rate high. And the human growth hormone means that when you start eating again, you will lay down lean mass, right?
Wow.
So your body's not that stupid, right? It knows that you're going to have periods of starvation or fasting, right? Fasting is basically the controlled version. But in the caveman days, it was starvation. You had nothing to eat for 7 days. It's you know, there's no rabbits around, right? So you can't eat anything, and your body knows that. So what it does is it's evolved this mechanism where you're not going to lose all your lean muscle, because you can't. If you did, you'd be dead, right? After 5 days, you burn all your muscle and you've gained all this fat, right? Now you've just got fat, right? And it's like all these Native Indians and Native Americans and Kalahari Bush people and the Aboriginals, they have these repeated feast-famine cycles, so they should be like little balls of 100% fat, right? Every single one of them, right? It's like, that doesn't happen, right? So this is, again, another myth that gets perpetuated because everybody wants you to not fast. There's no money in it, right? There's no money in it for anybody. Nobody wants to promote it. Nobody wants to be a champion for it because it's just like, hey, how am I going to make money if I promote it, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense for most people.
Really interesting. And going back to the evolutionary aspect of it, the people that couldn't do this, the people that couldn't preserve lean muscle mass and burn glycogen and then fat over time, their genes probably are not here because they didn't make it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's another component.
And the other thing is that not all that protein is good, right? Everybody has this inherent bias that all that protein is really good stuff, right? Well, there's all kinds of situations where that protein is not good stuff, right? So for example, in Alzheimer's disease, there's all this abnormal protein gumming up your brain, and that's why you can't think, right? Well, what if you had a process which could actually break down this junky old protein and get rid of it? Well, that's what fasting does. Because again, your body's like, oh, I'm not getting any nutrients here. Let me look for any of the junky old proteins that I don't need. Let me break them down. And that process is called autophagy. And it's been a super hot topic because the 2016 Nobel Prize in Medicine went to one of the pioneers of research in autophagy. It's super important because you can, theoretically, prevent all kinds of disease, cancers, for example, because all those cancerous cells, they need glucose, they're going to die, but also your body's going to target them, say, what the hell is this? Let's burn it for energy, right? All that flabby excess skin. I have never referred a patient to a plastic surgeon to take off that excess skin from weight loss. Why? Because your body can take care of that, right?
Wow.
And everybody says, oh, how can you know? How do you know? Well, think about it for a second. If you look at pictures of Holocaust survivors or American prisoners of war in Japan from World War II, they were big guys. They went and got starved for a long time. When you saw those pictures, did they have like flabby, loose skin everywhere?
No.
No, because your body says, I don't want that flabby, loose skin, and I need energy. I'm burning that protein right now, right? So it takes it, burns it all down into energy, and that's it, because it's not necessary, right?
Wow.
And that's the thing, is that everybody thinks these excess proteins are good. I don't think they're all that good. I think that there's actually a lot of protein that could be gotten rid of. Like if you are obese, then it's a very good option for you, because you know for a fact that you're going to be burning more fat than protein. If you're very lean, it may not be the best option for you. If you're lean and you want to build muscle, these long fasts are probably not your best. Probably not your best idea, right? And it's not that fasting is bad; it's that you're not applying the knowledge that we have to your situation. Right? So we get, exactly. So if you're 400 pounds and type 2 diabetic, yeah, maybe a long fast is good for you. If you're 150 pounds and all muscle, and you're worried about performance athletics, that 5-day fast is not necessarily good for you, right? Because you don't have a lot of fat, you're going to burn more protein proportionally, and maybe you don't have all that much excess protein anyway, right? So yeah, maybe not the best idea. So there's a lot of context in this, right? And it's like anything else, right? It's like running. Do we ever say, oh, I went out, I ran a marathon, I didn't do any training, but I ran a marathon and I just about died, right? It's like, well, that was stupid, right? That's what we tell them, right? We don't say, oh, running's so bad for you, right? But we do that in fasting. Some guy says, I'm going to do a 30-day fast, water only. I'm like, and you're like 110 pounds. And then it's like, oh, he almost died. I'm like, well, that's because he was stupid, right? Not because the fasting was bad. You've got to take it in context. It's a therapeutic tool. That means you can use it or not use it, right? But you've got to know where to use it and apply the knowledge. And this is the thing, right? It's we get to this point of hysteria where we just look at it and say, oh, fasting's so bad for you, right? There's so much inherent bias against it.
Yeah, what I've heard is that it lowers glutathione and it burns muscle. Those are the two big ones that I've heard quite a bit. But I want to go back a little bit. There's a lot of things that we just want to catch everyone up, make sure we're all on the same speed. You said you fast 3 days a week periodically. What does that look like?
So I typically do 24-hour fasts. So the thing is about fasting is that there really is any duration you want to do, right? So you can do longer ones. You can do, so Jimmy Moore did a 21-day fast, for example. And you can do kind of 16-8, which is a 16-hour fast every day, which is also a very good thing. Our number one rule is to fit it into your lifestyle to where you get the results that you want, right? So that's probably our number one rule. So if you are very obese and type 2 diabetic, well, maybe you'll have to adjust your life a little bit to fit this in, right? Because you're not getting the results that you want. But otherwise, if you're getting good results, then there's no reason to change. So you don't want to change your life to fit the fasting necessarily, unless there's health concerns, because it's hard in that you're not going to be able to sustain it because that's not your regular life. But for me, this is what works well. I do a 24-hour fast, which means I don't eat breakfast, I don't eat lunch, so I go dinner to dinner. It's a 24-hour fast. If you want to be technical, maybe it's a 23-hour fast, right? But either way, it's most of the 24 hours I'm fasting. And I'll do that 2 to 4 times a week, and it all depends on the week, right? Some weeks I have lunch plans, right? And therefore I'll eat lunch. If that week I don't, then I won't, right? So that's basically it, right? So I have no idea. Some weeks are very good and some weeks are very bad, right? So it really fluctuates up and down depending on how busy I am. So that's really all it is, right? But what I do is I fit that into my life, and it doesn't interrupt my life in any way, right? So today, for example, I'm doing this, so I won't eat lunch. That means I can go to the hospital and get my work done on time, because normally I would go to lunch. I mean, not that I do that much anymore anyway, but normally I would take out 45 minutes and go to lunch, or if I had lunch plans, I would do, lunch meeting or whatever, right? That would take that time. But now I kind of go in and I'm at the same point, so I can go home on time, even though I've done something over lunch, right? But I haven't needed to take the time, right? So this is the thing. You gotta fit that into your life, and nobody even knows, right? It's like it fits seamlessly in. So that's why I do it.
Yeah.
Do I do longer ones? Occasionally, not very often, because I tend to have dinner with my family most nights. So it would be very disruptive for me to be sitting there and not eating while everybody else is eating, right? Now they know I talk about it all the time, obviously, so if I were to say, oh, I'll sit down with you, but I won't eat, But again, it's a social thing. You're there, with your family. It's dinner time. You talk and you eat, and that's what we do, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it would be disruptive to do a lot more than that. So I don't, right?
Plus, I mean, you're very lean. You don't look like you need to lose much weight. You're just going after the anti-aging benefits of this, and
it helps me maintain my weight. Honestly, I do it more because it gives me a lot more time to do stuff. But it also. Not just that, but I mean, there's other benefits, but some of them, like the autophagy and stuff, you probably have to go a bit longer, right? But I don't have any specific reason to go longer, right? I'm where I want to be in terms of my weight, and I'm not diabetic, so there's no reason for me to do longer, right? Other than if I was, really just for the challenge of it, that'd be about it, right?
Yeah,
but I don't feel particularly compelled to do that. So.
Yeah, me neither. I do like the 24-hour fast periodically. I've been doing like once a week after reading your book and hearing you talk about that. Let's talk about the anti-aging properties. A lot of people are spending a lot of their discretionary income on Botox and liposuction, whatever, trying to slow down the aging process. And you mentioned that when you go into this, when you're fasting, you increase growth hormone and other anti-aging hormones, get rid of the junk you don't need. What have you seen? I mean, this can be anecdotal too, Dr. Fung, from your patients, like skin tightening. Do they look younger? I personally have noticed that with people that do intermittent fast.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, because a lot of these things are, the skin, for example, is protein. So therefore, you can have differences in the skin that come around with intermittent fasting. So some people have noticed it, definitely. I mean, Jimmy Moore was talking about this, some of his skin tags popped off and so on. And, when I looked at his, that's a fairly extended fast, so it gives you a good idea. When you look at him, or the other day when he finished the 21 days, it's like, wow, he looks really good.
Yeah.
That's what I thought the other day. He just looks very healthy. Obviously, he has more weight to lose that he'd like to lose. Sure, so does everybody, right? But he just looked like he had that kind of vitality, right? And it's not all about weight, right? You can be all, thin and still not look, healthy. So definitely what happens during the process of fasting is that you get rid of all the kind of old cells, which is the autophagy, and it's whenever you want to renovate, for example, a house, you actually have to tear down all that old stuff first, right? So what you do if you have kitchen cabinets you want to renovate, you got to tear all the old ones down, then you put up new ones, right? You can't simply put up new ones, and that's kind of our mistake, is that we think that, oh, everything's good, but you can't build a new cabinet on top of an old one, right? You got to tear it down. And that's what the fasting does, right? It tears down all the old stuff. Then when you do eat again, then you'll build new stuff, right? And that's a lot healthier. It's a lot better for you than just trying to add on, right? And that's one of the kind of secrets. And it's obvious, it's intuitive when you think about it, but most people don't really think that deeply. So they always think, oh, more protein is better. More protein is better. Let's just keep doing this with the protein.
Yeah, really interesting. I love that analogy. It makes a lot of sense intuitively, like you said, and to kind of get rid of the weaker cells. Let's talk about autophagy. So this is a hot topic in the anti-aging community as well. And I heard you say, I actually got this question. I did a kind of a lunch and learn yesterday for some integrative naturopathic type doctors. And one of the questions came up about, so autophagy, it takes they were asking, is it 36 hours, 48 hours? I haven't looked at that particular research.
It actually depends on mammalian target of rapamycin. That's one of the big, which is called mTOR. So mTOR is a major regulator of autophagy, and it's actually protein that is the big turnoff, right? So what happens is that mTOR is essentially a nutrient sensor. It kind of senses how much nutrients are coming in. So if you have a little bit of protein, it actually kind of senses that very, very quickly. And the mTOR is what turns on and off autophagy. So you could be fasting, and so if one of the things we use is bone broth, and it has a lot of protein, if you want autophagy, then it may be best not to use it, because you may turn off that kind of autophagy. So on the other hand, theoretically, and there's not a lot of research into this, right? But theoretically, you could eat pure fat and still get autophagy. right? So if you ate 0 carbs, because again, it's not the calories, it's not a calorie sensor, it's a protein sensor. So it's very interesting that if you eat pure fats, so some people do this, right? Fat
MCTs
fast and MCTs or bulletproof coffee or whatever it is, you could actually, theoretically, not fast at all. You could be taking hundreds and hundreds of calories, right, with bulletproof coffee a couple times a day, right? You could easily get 1,500 calories if you take a couple of cups of that, right? But you could get almost all the benefits, right? So that's very interesting. Now there's not a lot, but in terms of length, you're probably so it could be 0, right, as long as you're kind of avoiding all the protein. If you are taking protein, you could be doing this kind of bone broth fasting and never get autophagy, right? So, but if you're doing kind of classic water-only fast, my guess is somewhere between 24 and 48 hours. My guess is also that it depends a little bit on your underlying state. So if you have a lot of, kind of underlying protein, then you're going to get rid of it, right? But if you don't, then you're not, right? So again, if you take those, say, Holocaust survivors, right, it's not a good idea to turn on autophagy, right? Those guys have nothing, right? So I think you have to kind of take that into account too. So for regular people, assuming you're doing kind of classic water only, I'd say somewhere between 24 and 48 hours. Again, because of the glycogen stores and so on. Obviously, if you're in a kind of low carb state already, it may not take that long because you're kind of in that kind of pre-ketosis state kind of thing.
Yeah, 2 things come up with that I think people are interested. What's the link between, so elevated levels of mTOR drive autophagy? Is that kind of the signaling molecule that triggers that, or is it the opposite?
I think it's the opposite. I think it's a negative regulator.
I see.
Yeah, so it goes, so I think it senses protein as the main thing, mTOR is, and then I think when mTOR goes up, it goes down or something like that. Yeah.
So a lot of people are taking like branched chain amino acids while they're fasting, so that would negate the autophagy, is where I was getting.
Yeah, same
interesting.
thing.
So
but certain ones are worse than others, so I haven't looked specifically then to which ones. I had written it down, but honestly, I can't remember. It's not important, but there are certain ones that are more important for mTOR than others. I don't remember if it was the branched chain ones, but it's the same thing, right? Bone broth, which is relatively healthy, and branched chain amino acids and stuff. Yeah, you could lose some of the benefits from that. And again, to me, it's like, well, if you're going to do it and you're worried about it, then do classic water only. When you eat, take your branched chain amino acids, right? What's wrong with that? Take it when you eat, right? So it doesn't mean that you can't take it, but when you're doing your fasting, then just do the fasting, right? Don't try and mix up the two. And the same thing with the bone broth, which is again a fairly healthy thing. If you want to do that, you can change the schedule so that you take the bone broth when you eat. Right? So you get the benefits. There's all these other kind of traditional benefits of bone broth.
Yeah.
We use it to increase compliance, truthfully. So people feel like it's easier. The other reason we use it in more extended fast, because then you can put some salt in. It's easier to get salt.
Yeah.
So if you do water only, you're getting very little salt, which sometimes causes people to get a bit dizzy and sometimes causes some headaches and stuff. So other people have done salt and water, which sounds super gross, but apparently when you're salt depleted, it tastes pretty good.
That is funny.
So for that, we say, well, then use a broth or a vegetable broth for those vegetarians, because then you can put a lot of salt in, and then you won't get those sort of symptoms. So it increases compliance because it makes it easier. You still get most of the benefits of the fasting. It's not a true fast, but you get most of it, right? So I'm not big on saying that, oh, you have to do it because then technically it's not a fast. I only care about results, right? How you get there, makes no difference to me. If you do a standard diet and get to where you want to go, then hey, who am I to tell you not to do what you're doing, right?
Right.
But if you want to change, it's because whatever you're doing is not working. Then I'll show you what I think is the best way, right? And then you try it and see if it works.
Yeah, and so those recommendations, how specific are they in terms of weaving in the bone broth or the salt? Is it after day 2 or 3, or just when you feel a little hunger?
No, we usually have people use it just whenever they feel like it. And then if people don't do well, then we simply tell them to cut it out.
Okay.
But we have older patients, so typically we will stick to shorter fasts. duration. So again, this is that kind of context. If you're trying to treat like 75-year-olds, which I am, then you probably shouldn't be so aggressive, because then somebody could get hurt, right? So we shy away from like a 30-day fast, right? But if you're like looking for a challenge and you're 400 pounds and you're 40 years old and you're pre-diabetic, well, you probably could do an extended fast as long as you're kind of monitor yourself, you got family around you and stuff, right? Sure, go ahead, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that, but there is a context. You got to use it where you think it's appropriate.
And as a nephrologist, what have you seen in terms of restoration in kidney function through fasting in these elderly folks?
There's very little.
Okay.
See, I had hoped that people would get better, but in truth, they don't. The kidney disease, once the damage is done, is almost irreversible. So there are a few people who have reversed some of the mild parts of kidney disease, but fewer than I would have liked. The truth is that kidney damage takes many decades. And even making them better, you can't reverse that damage. It's like if you have a car and you don't change the oil, then it breaks down. You go, oh, now I'm going to change the oil. Well, it's still broken down, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you change it now, right? You have to prevent the damage. It actually goes for a lot of organ systems. The organ is very good at repairing damage, but when that damage happens, it's very rarely reversible. Chronic damage, anyway. So you have to prevent it.
Yeah, which is the whole point of this podcast, is preventative medicine, so people don't have to worry about that so much. One thing that's come up is hormone issues, like low testosterone. We know that, low hormones, low androgens in men precipitates insulin resistance and obesity and so forth. So what have you seen as a practitioner in men, like hypogonadism? Have you seen testosterone increase with fasting?
There's not much of a difference. So we get this question with women in fasting a lot too.
Yeah.
So the main hormone that's affected in terms of fasting is insulin, because that's really the main hormone involved in energy metabolism, energy regulation. And some people say, well, about the thyroid? I'm like, there's maybe minor effects, but nothing major. We've put hundreds of people on, and we haven't seen a lot of thyroid disease. Some people will have thyroid disease anyway.
Yeah.
But it doesn't seem to precipitate it, because it has nothing to do with thyroid. And it's the same with the testosterone, it's the same with the sex hormones, estrogen. So it doesn't make it better, and it doesn't really make it worse. So there are certain issues like polycystic ovarian syndrome, which are actually part of the metabolic syndrome, which do get better. But for the most part, it's no difference. And that's why some people say, oh, women shouldn't fast. I'm like, well, where do you get that from, right? And it's always the same studies of 5 rats that somebody pointed out at one point.
Yeah.
And it's kind of ridiculous, because, women have fasted for thousands of years, right? Literally millions of women today fast, right? All the Muslims, all the Christians, right? Muslims do it in Ramadan. We just passed Yom Kippur, and it's a day of fasting. During Lent, millions of women fast, right? So literally hundreds of millions of women fast at some point during the year. So if they're going to have problems, like, don't you think we would have heard about them, right?
Yeah.
And if we heard about them, then somebody would have said, maybe the Prophet Muhammad or Jesus Christ or Buddha would have said, well, look at all these problems women are having with fasting. We shouldn't do it, right? Because otherwise we're going to kill them all, right? Or if you're going to, but again, it's all context, right? So there are women who shouldn't fast. Pregnant women, breastfeeding women, and if you're underweight, because if you're underweight and you have no fat, you shouldn't be fasting, man or woman, but the women are going to lose their periods, right? So yeah, they shouldn't be fasting. That's just common sense, right?
Yeah.
But we turn around and blame the fasting when it's like, well, you should blame your own stupidity, because if you are seriously underweight, then fasting is a super bad idea, right? You see the same kind of hysteria around anorexia nervosa.
Yeah.
Oh, it's ironic, actually, because when you talk about fasting, the first thing people say after they roll their eyes is they say, nobody's going to do that. And then you say, oh, well, I have hundreds of people who do that. And then shortly thereafter, then, you're going to give them all anorexia. I'm like, okay, first you thought nobody would do that. Now you think they're going to love it so much that they won't stop doing that, right? It's like, come on, you can't have it both ways. And it's always funny because it's like, okay, first of all, anorexia nervosa is a psychiatric disorder of body image, right? So it's not simply that you're not eating, it's because your mental state is disturbed so that you think you're seriously overweight when you're not. That's not what fasting is, right? So it's like saying, oh, you shouldn't wash your hands, you're going to get obsessive compulsive disorder. It's like, okay, that's dumb, right? And it's the same thing. The second thing is that it's not that much fun, right? It's not like I'm going to get hooked on it like cocaine, right? I mean, I've treated hundreds of people. It's a challenge to get them to do it, right? Even when they have a lot of motivation to do it. Anorexia is almost the last thing on my mind. But again, here's the context. If you're a 60-year-old woman who is 250 pounds, type 2 diabetes, you need to lose that weight, anorexia is not my concern anywhere in the top 1,000 medical problems that could come up, right? So don't talk to me about I'm going to give them anorexia. Nobody in that patient profile is going to develop anorexia nervosa. In fact, many of them won't do it because they just don't want to, right? If it's an 18-year-old model from New York who has a body mass index of 16, I wouldn't do fasting for her, but that's just common sense, right? So this is the whole thing. Anorexia nervosa is a serious problem, but fasting, which is only the symptom, is only part of it, right? It's not the disease, right? It's only what they do because they have this disease. But it doesn't mean that you should throw it out as a therapeutic option for everybody. So in terms of hormones, you know, thyroid hormone and sex hormones and all these other hormones, they're really not that affected that much.
Interesting.
We're really talking about the insulin and the counter-regulatory hormones. Cortisol is a question, though, because it does go up, right? Cortisol does go up. It's part of the counter-regulatory hormones. So if you have problems with high stress levels, increased cortisol, remember, fasting is a stress to the body, right? So there are things that stress the body that are good, right? There's also bad things, too. But exercise is a stress to the body, too, right? You stress the body, and the body responds by getting stronger. Fasting is much the same. It's also a stress to the body. It can go overboard, right? So again, you have to know what you're doing. But for the most part, I mean, humans have been doing it for thousands of years, right? If you start fasting, you feel really bad and you think your cortisol levels, for whatever reason, are sky high and you can't deal with it, then then it's maybe not for you. Or maybe you need to shorten it, or maybe you need to change, or maybe you need to alter it some way, because there's infinite flexibility. The other hormone that does go up, of course, is noradrenaline. So you do get more energy and you don't get that basal metabolic rate decrease that you get with caloric restriction, which is the key to weight loss, right? It also sometimes causes sleep disturbances, and it's because they're so full of energy that they actually can't sleep or wake up and can't go back to sleep. And I tell them, then don't. Go do something.
Read a book.
Do some work, whatever you want, because your body is telling you, you don't need to go to sleep, right? You've got lots of energy. And the thing is that's okay. You're listening to your body. But getting back to the basal metabolic rate decrease, actually that is the most important part of weight loss. Losing weight is never a problem, right? Every single diet you can lose weight. For 6 months you can lose weight. The problem is almost all diets, they go back up, right? And the problem is that as you lose weight, your basal metabolic rate will go down. So you're burning less calories. And then that weight plateaus, and then it goes back up. And it happens for almost all diets. And it's interesting because we've known about it for like 100 years. But what doesn't decrease your basal metabolic rate is fasting, okay? So that is a huge advantage in weight loss, because that means you can keep that weight off.
Right,
so
that's big.
It's huge. So if you compare, for example, this recent study that I was telling you about, where they compared daily caloric reduction to alternate daily fasting, you can see that the caloric reduction decreased their basal metabolic rate by about 80 calories a day, which was statistically significant, whereas the fasting one decreased it by about 29, which was not statistically significant, right? P value of like 0.48 or something like that, right?
Okay.
So in other words, what that tells you is that caloric reduction reduces your basal metabolic rate. Fasting does not, right? Huge advantage. It's like almost impossible to emphasize that enough, because that is the one problem that always occurs with weight loss. It's the weight regain, weight plateau. Forget about the weight loss. Everybody can lose weight on almost any diet, right? That's why the 6-month results are always great. It's the BMR, right? The BMR.
Yeah.
The other one is the hunger, of course. But
what I think is interesting about that particular study that you're talking about is, if you look at the end of 1 week, I would imagine the calorie intake is pretty equivalent. Would you say?
For which one?
Between both the intermittent fasting group or the alternate day fasting versus...
There's 2 studies actually. So one of them actually controlled for calories, which is very interesting because they controlled for calories. So intermittent fasting versus caloric reduction, same number of calories, same weight loss at the end of 6 months, right? But that's not the key. The key is the long term, right? And unfortunately, they didn't go past 6 months. But what you found was that the insulin resistance was much better with the fasting group, and the insulin level was much better. So again, a reflection of the insulin resistance.
Yeah.
The other study was actually not calorically matched. So the fasting people were eating less calories than the caloric reduction people, yet did not reduce their metabolic rate, right?
Powerful.
Very, very powerful. Like it's so important. That part is like so important because that is the key. Like I don't know why nobody else talks about it, because that is, we know that, right? All those studies, for example, that recently came out about the Biggest Loser studies, right? So that got a lot of press, rightfully so. They're good studies, right? But what they pointed out was that the reason why practically nobody, could keep that weight off was the decrease in basal metabolic rate. Except for, I think there was one person, and it is very interesting because the other person had bariatric surgery, which is, another form of very severe caloric restriction, right? And what happened to his metabolic rate was it went back up. I'm like, wow, fascinating.
Yeah, very interesting. So really, if we can kind of summarize the intermittent fasting or alternate day fasting as a kind of a protocol if people want to embark on, how is it different than calorie restriction? Is it probably is affecting signaling molecules throughout the body in a different way than just cutting your calories isn't, epigenetically or vice versa?
Yeah. See, the thing is that everybody tries to pretend like it's all about calories, but you've got to get out of that mindset because the calories really has nothing to do with it. Fasting is about time not eating, right? It has nothing to say about calories. The calories is 0, right? But it's really about the time that you don't eat. It's about changing your hormones, changing your insulin, changing your growth hormone, changing all that, right? It has nothing to do with calories, right? So everybody says, well, fasting works because it reduces calories. Well, no, because you can compare the two and you will see that there are differences. So it's not all about the calories. It's the same thing. If you say it's all the same, well, you could say, well, it should be the same if you jump off a 1-foot wall 100 times or if you jump off a 100-foot wall once. It's the same. It's all about the foot to the feet, right? It's 100 feet. Exactly. And I'm like, oh, except that one you die and one of them you don't, right? That's a huge difference. It's the same thing. So fasting, even if it was the same calories, is not the same. The hormonal changes are not the same. And that's the point of the obesity code, is that it's not a caloric imbalance. It's a hormonal imbalance, right? So cutting calories does not fix that hormonal imbalance, right? Fasting, to some degree, helps it much better, right? And there are other things. You have to change the diet, maybe stress, maybe sleep. There's all kinds of things to do with obesity that have to be changed in order for you to fix it.
Yeah.
Of which one is fasting. It's not everything, right? Some people, it's stress, it's cortisol, right? So some people have chronic pain syndromes and stuff. I'm like, well, your cortisol is like through the roof, right? Fasting is not going to help you at all, right? It's going to shoot it up even more, right? And you shouldn't do it, right? So you have to kind of understand that. But the problem is that we've gotten to the point where we just kind of poo-poo it for everybody, right? It's also not a cure-all for everybody, too.
Yeah. Now, the cortisol, are you testing that serum? Is that what you're seeing, or you just
we
hear
don't
that?
test it. I mean, we have looked at studies of people who test it. I mean, we're not a research lab or anything, so we don't test it. It's not easily available. None of the hormones are easily available because hormones in general are pulsatile, so you can't actually measure it easily. You can do things like 24-hour urinary cortisol, but they're hard to do, and in the end, we just make our clinical judgment.
Yeah, and just tell people. I mean, my personal experience with fasting, I don't get that like fight or flight response that you get in traffic, but you definitely feel more energized. That's an N of one, but some people, and so I think this is a lifestyle shift, and so meditation and heart math and doing mindful-based therapies is part of the equation. For people.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways you can incorporate it, and that's really the key, right? You could do once a year a long fast, right? Some people recommend that for sure. You could do short daily fast, 16-8, right? Every day you eat within an 8-hour window. And remember this, in the 50s, for example, there's very little obesity. People are eating white bread, right? Jam, right? Cookies, ice cream, right? There's no whole wheat bread, or if there was, nobody ate it, right? I know, I grew up in the 70s, nobody ate whole wheat bread, ever, right? There was no whole wheat pasta, right? Everybody ate regular pasta. But the key was, there was no snacking either, right? So what happened is that you ate within usually a 10-hour window, right? You had breakfast at 8, you had dinner at 6. And everything outside of that, there's no snacks, you didn't eat in the car, you didn't eat at the theater, you didn't eat anywhere else, except at a table, right?
With family or coworkers.
With family or whatever, right?
Yeah.
You're not eating at your desk, you're not eating in front of the computer, you're not doing any of these things where you're eating but doing something else, this kind of mindless eating sort of thing, right? So what that means is that you've got a 10-hour eating window, you've got a 14-hour everyday fast. Right?
Yeah.
And guess what? There's no obesity. But they're eating white bread and jam like crazy.
Cereal.
Every day.
Yeah.
I packed a sandwich with white bread every day, right?
Yeah.
To school. So it's like, that's crazy because this is the thing. You can go back to that time where you kind of take those 3 meals a day. And lots of people at that time, like in France, for example, they'd have coffee in the morning and that's it. Nothing else. And they were really healthy, right? And even the word itself, break fast, right? It means you have to fast. Because you can't break the fast if you're not fasting. It's a part of everyday life. And we lost that balance. And for some reason, we listen to real fools that keep telling us, oh, you got to eat the minute you roll out of bed. Like if your feet hit the ground and you don't have like a cereal in your mouth, you're going to die, right? It's like, okay, you guys are idiots, right? Yeah. And then you have to eat right up until the time you go to bed. It has to be breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, snack, and then another bedtime snack. It's like, that's supposed to lose weight? You're supposed to eat more to lose weight? Like, that doesn't even sound like it's going to work, right?
Right.
You have all these kind of, even doctors who kind of spout this tremendous nonsense. And it's like, okay, where's your trial to tell us that that's really useful advice? Because that advice sounds really dumb to me, right? And of course, they have none. But now it gets enshrined, it gets repeated enough, it gets enshrined into this kind of wisdom. It's like, is there any historical background to this? No, right? Nobody's ever done that before, and nobody's ever had this obesity crisis before. Well, they might be connected, right?
Yeah.
Really eating all the time, obesity crisis, right? It's like not that hard, right? They're eating Oreo cookies in the 50s, they're eating Kit Kats, right? Nobody cared that much because they had that daily fast to kind of reset themselves. And if you tried to take a snack, it's like there's no food to eat in the house, right? There's a cold pot roast leftover from dinner, right?
You had to actually cook it and prepare. Mom had,
Exactly.
Really
it's not like there's stuff just lying around. But now we pretend like, oh yeah, we're gonna leave like granola bars around and stuff, sugary good granola bars, so that you can have a little snack at nighttime so you can lose weight. I'm like, oh my God, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I can't believe people actually tell you this stuff, right? It's insane.
Really insane, really interesting. So let's go back a little bit to the bulletproof coffee situation, where some people are using like MCTs to kind of mirror the, what do we want to say, the metabolic phenotype of calorie restriction or of intermittent fasting by going into ketosis. Is there any problems that you see with that in your clients?
Not really. Okay. So if you understand the physiology, all the benefits of fasting, or many of the benefits of fasting, come from reducing insulin, right? Well, pure fat has almost no insulin effect. So if all you're consuming is pure fat, you're getting a lot of calories, but you're not getting a lot of insulin, right? So therefore, you're getting almost all the benefits of fasting. And guess what? That's, a lot of people have said that it's really helped them and the fat keeps them full and makes the fasting easier. And I'm like, hey, if that works for you, then I'm good with that, right? Yeah. Now, for other people, they find that it slows down their weight loss. And I said, well, then don't do it, right? But theoretically, from a physiologic standpoint, yeah, if the point of fasting is to lower insulin, and the fat fasting or the bulletproof coffee also lowers insulin, then yes, it's fine. So I actually think that there's a lot of good reasons to believe that that would work.
Yeah. And along those lines, a lot of the folks like Jung Rowe and other folks in the ketogenic diet space doing research in drug-resistant seizures and so forth have found that intermittent fasting and the ketogenic style of eating go hand in hand.
Oh, absolutely.
And so there's a lot of the crossover there. So I think it's important that we're having this conversation.
Yeah. The ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting are really just along that same spectrum. They're actually close cousins, basically. Yeah. Because the ketogenic diet, by being ultra low carb, lowers insulin. If you compare fasting to a low carb diet, the low carb diet actually delivers 71% of the insulin lowering as fasting. Now, you can't get better than fasting because you can't get lower than zero, right? Yeah. But it gets you most of the way there, this sort of ketogenic diet. So it actually is very, very effective. So a lot of the diseases of hyperinsulinemia, which is obesity, type 2 diabetes, can be treated very effectively with a ketogenic diet. So I have no problem. The other thing that most people have found is that if you're on a ketogenic diet, or if you're on a low carb diet, fasting is like really, really easy. And it's the same thing because your body's so adapted to fat metabolism, right? So after that first 2 weeks, your body's so used to burning fat, it makes no difference if it's burning fat like butter or fat like body fat. It's the same fat, right? Yeah. So it just burns it. So if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. And maybe the ketones maybe suppress the appetite, so you don't have to eat, right? So there's so many ways that they kind of go together that they're really, one is just kind of a ramped up version of the other one. Yeah. That's it, right? A lot of people worry about nutrition or nutrient density and so on, but again, you have to take it into context, right? It depends on what you're treating. So if you're worried about getting enough nutrients, okay, then yeah, you have to worry about nutrient density and all that. I typically treat people who are obese, so I'm not worried at all about nutrient density because they have way too much nutrients, right? So I don't care. So they can fast because I don't need them to get more nutrients. They have had enough nutrients, right? Yeah. They don't need more nutrients. Why do they need more? Like, what nutrient are you talking about, right? Are they going to get like scurvy or something, right? I don't think so, right? So that's the thing. So if you're, on the other hand, kind of one of these performance athletes and you're looking to build muscle, so if you want to build muscle, you got to take more muscle because you got to deposit it to build muscle, then yeah, you better worry about getting enough protein. Sure. Right? If you're obese and trying to lose weight for health reasons, then you don't need to, right? So there's a difference, right? And you got to kind of keep that in mind all the time when you take what somebody says, because that's where everybody gets into trouble, right? Somebody takes what I say out of context where I'm treating a 65-year-old diabetic woman, and they're like a 22-year-old
CrossFit athlete.
Exactly. I'm like, yeah, what I say doesn't apply to you, right? Whereas the ketogenic person who's taking super high protein because they're looking to build muscle, that doesn't apply to this 70-year-old man who weighs 350 pounds, right? He doesn't need more protein. He needs to break down some of that protein on his body before he starts taking more, right? So always keep that in mind because we're talking at different things and it all depends on what you want to do. If you want to build muscle, then yeah, you got to adjust it. If you want to lose weight, you got to adjust it. If you want to treat type 2 diabetes, you got to adjust what you're doing.
Yeah, really good. I love that context. It's everything. It's really important.
It's everything, yeah.
And so that encourages, people need to think for themselves a little bit and do trials on themselves. Like take this information and customize it a little bit to their own lifestyle and needs. And speaking of your own lifestyle and needs, Dr. Fung, I want to kind of pick your brain a little bit. These are 3 final questions that we ask every guest on the podcast about your morning routine. So you've written 2 books, you have a busy practice here and then also in the hospital with kidney patients. I know your morning's pretty valuable, probably with family, but you stay up on research, you have a great blog and all that. So what does the first couple hours of your day look like?
Well, I don't eat breakfast, right? I usually just have a coffee. That's kind of Monday to Friday. Saturdays and Sundays, I usually will have breakfast because it's, again,
Kids
family time, right?
Yeah.
And then usually I'm right into work. I drop off the kids and I'm right at work, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm either in the office or I'm in the hospital, depending on which day it is.
So when you do your creative time, writing, thinking, reading, staying up on research?
The writing, I mean, I write mostly, it's mostly like 1 blog post per week. That's about what I do. So I try to maintain that. It's not bad. The book itself, the books are kind of more compilations of the blog posts, but there's a lot of work to be done, taking them, organizing them,
so
editing them, so it flows properly, right? The blog posts, it's whatever I think interests me that week, right? So there is a lot of that that gets put together. I usually, again, when it gets busy, I do more fasting. I get a few extra hours, and it adds up, right? So, for example, I've been fairly busy the last few weeks, and I estimate that it's at least 3 to 4 times a week I've been fasting, kind of 24 hours. But again, I don't have to waste my time at breakfast. I don't have to waste my time at lunch. Not that it's a waste, but you know, it gives me time to do something else. So that's like what, an hour 15 every day?
That's a lot.
4 days is 5 hours a week. In a month, that's like 20 hours, right? It's a lot of time.
Yeah.
And if you need the time, then it's good to be able to kind of use that when you need to. So that's where I kind of get a bit of extra time to do what interests me and what I want to do, right? So that's kind of what I do, right? In the kind of down periods, it's more like twice a week, right? 'Cause, everybody likes to eat, right?
Yeah.
So I go eat more, right? At lunchtime or whatever it is. But when I get really busy, then I probably do it less.
That's really awesome. I mean, because a lot of people complain, I don't have time to exercise. I don't have time to do this.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to create time is just, I mean, let's face it, eating, meal prep, driving to go get food, even healthy food like Whole Foods, you're sitting in traffic and driving around and waiting in line. So
yeah,
that's
it's not just the eating, but you got to remember it's the planning, the shopping, the cooking, then the eating, then the cleaning up, right? So it's the same at breakfast, right? It's not like shower and get out of here, right? And it's like the coffee, it doesn't take any time. You just hit the button, right?
Yeah.
That's it.
Ready to go.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really funny. So let's talk about your favorite herb, nutrient, botanical, or whole food substance. So your macronutrients are covered on a desert island. Vitamin D, omega-3s are covered. What other performance boosting substance or longevity promoting substance would you bring with you?
I don't know. I'm not really big into that. I mean, it's not my major, it's not really what I'm interested in because I deal with mostly the opposite spectrum in that I treat mostly excess, right? So people have over nutrients, right? So really cutting them down is the main thing. So other than a general multivitamin, I don't make many recommendations. The only thing that I use sometimes is the omega-3s. I find that it helps me with a bit of inflammation at times, like with the joints and so on. So the other thing I use quite a bit of is Epsom salts, which are magnesium salts. So a lot of people are deficient in magnesium. Probably the one thing more than any of the other minerals and so on that we see people deficient in is magnesium. If you take magnesium by mouth, then it often doesn't get absorbed and it just runs out the other side, right? So what you do with Epsom salts, they're magnesium salts, you dump them in your bath, you stir it up, and then it soaks through your skin. So if you soak in it for half an hour, a lot of magnesium kind of soaks in through your skin.
Yeah.
It's also very relaxing, right? You get
Right.
the ones that have like some scents and stuff. And I think that that's maybe one of the, more important things to do once in a while is to kind of take a bath, right? And I always tell this to my kids. It's like they go take a bath. I'm like, everybody feels better after a bath, right?
Yeah.
It's like that kind of thing you did when you were a kid, right? Nobody wants to go into the bath, but when you're in, there's something just relaxing about it, right? It's like the ocean. Everybody loves the ocean. There's just something about it, right? It's the salt on the sea. I think it's the same thing. So it's relaxing, and so you should do it every so often. It's cheap, right? It's just some water and some salt. That's it, right? It's not like I'm telling you to go to the Four Seasons in Maui or something like that, right?
Yeah.
It's cheap. It's like $10, a big bag of salt, and run a bath. And it's actually, I think, does people a lot of good. To do that every once in a while, soak in it, allows you to kind of ruminate on things, think about things. Because let's face it, when you're just driving around and shopping and doing errands and, getting birthday cards and taking your kids to this and that, there's not a lot of time to just kind of sit down and think. And sometimes that bath and the Epsom salts and a bit of that, the aromatherapy sort of idea, I think it's sometimes really helpful for people. Like the cortisol, it's the cortisol story, right? It kind of takes it down a notch.
Absolutely. And like you said, it's a good delivery system systemically for that magnesium.
Yeah.
Interestingly, just as a side note, Dr. Fung, interviewed a lot of people that treat autism, and that was one of their therapies in addition to like a gluten-free, dairy-free diet was Epsom salt baths. A lot of parents reported great feedback with that. So after learning about that about a year ago, I started doing that a lot with my daughter. So it's a cool way to calm her down too. The kids don't even know. You just pour the magnesium in there, and they're goofing around the bathtub and having a good time. Little do they know they're getting all the magnesium, which is pretty cool.
Well, they have all these nice scents, so I do that for my children as well. One is kind of a teenager now, so he doesn't take baths, right? Yeah. But the other one still likes to take a bath sometimes, and he actually likes the scent of it. So then he loves to take it. He doesn't know anything about the magnesium either. I just throw it in because it's fruity or whatever. I get one whenever he wants, right? But it's that kind of scent. He likes that, and so he uses it, right?
Yeah, really great point. So final question, if you were to bump shoulders with the future president of the US or Prime Minister of Canada, someone from the World Health Organization in an elevator, just had 30 seconds to share with them a health or lifestyle tip that you would want them to know to maybe influence policy around. What comes to mind, and what's the most important thing that they should know about?
Well, I think that we need to teach people about the therapeutic potential of fasting, because if you think about it, what we have here is a therapy that has the potential to change the entire health system of the whole world. Because most of what we do now is diabetes, high blood pressure, and all the downstream stuff, heart attacks, strokes, and all that. But you can take care of all of that for free. Right? The only thing that you need to do is apply that knowledge, right? You don't need to put money in it. You already have all the dietitians, you have everybody there. But we need to spread the knowledge of how to do it, because hey, if you don't eat, you'll lose weight. And hey, if you lose weight, your diabetes will go away. And hey, if you don't have diabetes, you won't get diabetic kidney disease, right? So now you've been able to prevent all this disease, probably like 50% of the healthcare budgets of the US and Canada, for free, right? That's an amazing, amazing thing. So who wouldn't want to do that, right? I mean, that's why we have to do it, because, it has so many benefits, but it has like real consequences. For the patient, it's preventing diabetes, preventing amputations, preventing heart attacks, preventing strokes. From a society standpoint, it's saving a hell of a lot of money, right? And not only that, it's saving it the right way, which is by preventing people from getting sick. That's why we're using less, hospitals, right? And all that stuff.
And moreover, people can be more productive. They feel better in anti-anxiety and productivity in workplace, marketplace, being more friendly with your friends and family because you're in a better mood, I found. So love that tip. So as a final kind of parting ways here, I know you're big on social media, you have a great blog. If folks want to connect with you online, what's the best way they can do that?
They can go to my blog. It's www.intensivedietarymanagement.com. I'm also on dietdoctor.com, which is like a great resource for low-carb recipes, intermittent fasting. There's a subscription site for that where you get kind of extra material, but there's tons and tons of free material that's just tremendous stuff. So definitely either of those sites is great.
Cool. Dr. Fung, really appreciate you coming on the show.
Okay,
Thanks
thank
so
you.
much.